Hey guys, this is Brian from Starlite Pulp. Hope everybody out there is doing well. I've got a bunch of authors here today from Starlite Pulp Review number 8, which is our newest release, just came out in July. And this is a really well balanced issue that I really enjoyed putting together. We've got Jake here as well, who is the associate editor here at Starlight. He helps me with the decisions as well, so he's going to help interview some of these folks as well. And so let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get started. Now my understanding, John, is that you are where right now? Did you say Cambodia?
I'm in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Yep.
Cambodia. Okay. So it's like 2 in the morning or something like that, right? For
It's
you.
2 in the morning.
Yeah, okay. So let's get you in and out, in here and out of here. Okay. So John is a very talented author. You've got what, over 20 books out at this point. I've had you on the podcast before, and in this particular issue, you've got this story that I just kind of found hilarious when you sent it along. And it's called Millard Fillmore Barks at Walls. And Millard Fillmore is actually the dog in the story. So, John, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the story, where it came from, and why you sent it along?
Yeah, I like a lot of my short stories these days. They have a gestation period of sometimes 20 years. Like a detail will come to me, and I'll think, oh, I need to use that in a short story, but I don't really have a story to go with it. So my this story is inspired in a lot of ways by my two ex-wives. So my first ex-wife, when we got married in a judge's house, and we had pugs. We had a lot of pets, but over the course of our relationship, we had 3 pugs. The judge had a pug that had dementia and barked at a wall the entire time that the ceremony was happening. And so, of course, I filed that away as I need to use that at some point. Um, when we got divorced, we ended up divvying up the many pets that we had, and it did cross my mind at some point. I'm like, if something happened to her, if the husband, because she got remarried, what if her new husband didn't want the pets anymore? So that was kind of the genesis, the origin of really thinking about it as a story, was this idea of this husband or new ex-husband, or in this case, the wife has died, and he contacts the first ex-husband to take over the guardianship of the aged pug. But I still didn't feel like I had a story at that point. And then 2 or 3 years ago, my first wife had died, and her sister-in-law contacted me to tell me about it. And this was a marriage almost 40 years ago now, and it was a very, very brief marriage. But a man that she had had an affair with contacted me out of the blue to tell me that she had died as well. And I just thought that was a very peculiar, like, would I have done, if I had had an affair with somebody 40 years ago, would I have contacted the long ago ex-husband to say that, like, oh, your ex-wife had died? I just thought that was a very peculiar detail. And that's when the story started really kind of coming together in some ways, was this kind of peculiar email that I got out of the blue from this guy, who I hadn't really thought about in 30 something years. And but it wasn't until I began thinking about it as a crime story that I was like, it had the momentum for me to write it. Before that, because I also write non-crime fiction, that I think I didn't really I didn't know where it would go, other than 2 guys meeting in this motel, exchanging the animal and having a conversation. And so once I began thinking about it as a potential crime story, then the pieces began kind of fitting together, and I wrote it rather quickly.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, that's interesting because you know the dog who barks at walls and has some dementia, right? And then also you know the dude from the affair reaching out to you. Both of those are included in the story. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's got a real kind of non-fictional base there, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. As a lot of my stories do. I mean, I always tell when people ask me, do I write autobiographical fiction? It's like I feel like I don't, but I could turn to almost any page of anything I've written and say, this detail came from here, this detail came from there. But sometimes it just takes a long time, this kind of gestation period. In this case, probably, I don't know, 30 years. I can't remember what year. I think I got married to my second wife in 2000, 2000
Mhm.
or 1999. I can't remember. So it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just it's like once that kind of constellation of details come together, that's when it becomes kind of interesting to me. But until then, it's like I occasionally just visit it and think like, oh, there's something there, but I don't know what it is yet.
Right, right. And you know what? It's so funny because I mean, you know, I'm a writer obviously, but then obviously I'm surrounded by writers all the time and I don't know a single writer who doesn't just constantly mine their own experiences, the things they see, you know, things that happen or the stories you hear from other people, right? You're constantly writing them down in the notes on your phone or on, you know, a notebook or whatever it is. I think we all do that, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, for me, it's like it's if I'm channeling the character, if I'm, I always tell my students this. It's like, I feel like to get to the point where I'm embodying a story, it's because I'm really embodying my own consciousness in a way, or I'm kind of mining it, almost like method acting. And it's like, and of course, it's going to be drawing on all of these different things from my life, and so it seems inevitable. I mean, I can't imagine writing a story that's not like that. Although the story is always smarter than me, and oftentimes I think like it takes me years to kind of, maybe 10 years later before I look at the story and go, oh, that's why I wrote that story.
Right,
But it's
right,
because I
right.
was dealing with this shit at that time. So,
And I'm curious really quickly, like, when you talk about like drawing from your own personal experience like that, especially when you add that other layer of it being a crime story, that kind of unlocks things. I feel like that then like heightens, it allows you a little bit more permission to like heighten those emotional feelings that you might be drawing on. And I'm curious, like, when you talk about how every page has something that you're pulling from, like, when you talk about embodying that character, are you feeling those emotions in a different way when you kind of add that other crime layer to it?
yeah, I mean that's what that ends up being the engine that gives at least in this particular story, it gave the story its purpose, which then gives it more of immediacy for the narrator. It's like, why is this narrator meeting this guy? Why is the other guy there? Well, the other guy's there because he's going to commit a crime. And so then it's like the tension between all of that. And then when I throw in the bartender who's listening and thinking that she knows what the story is by piecing it together through these different details that she overhears, um, just the dynamic of that really, yeah, I mean, it gave it more of a sense of urgency rather than this kind of slice of life of these two characters coming together to exchange this pet over the grief of losing a wife and this other guy whose ex-wife is from years ago. Um, yeah, it definitely heightens that, and it gives the ending more meaning too.
Sure.
Totally, totally.
Hey, John, I got a question for you. We're just talking stories from the review here, but I'm pretty sure at least we could go through everybody and ask, but I'm pretty sure you're the only person that just finished a film that
Yeah,
about
I don't
something
know.
you
Yeah,
wrote and you created and you kind of, I mean, you directed it, didn't you?
yeah,
Okay, so talk just briefly, but talk about I believe it's called Black Sheep, right?
yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm in Cambodia for the year. I'm here. So I'm on sabbatical from my university job, and I'm getting ready to retire. And um I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and so my plan of coming here was just to come here, kind of relax, check out some other countries around here, try to figure out where to retire. But once I got here, I began meeting a lot of people um, who've worked on different films here, both expats and local Khmer people who work in the film industry. And I'd had this idea that I had been thinking about for a while. Um, because one of the things is I watch a lot of YouTube videos about Southeast Asia, and a lot of the people, it's like I become invested in the people, even if I don't like them. It's like their narrative over the course of 6 years becomes interesting to me, and sometimes I kind of hate watch them. And then other people I just like, and so I watch them for that reason. And so that whole culture of these YouTubers who come here and become interested in the place or live here or are kind of assholes who live here, whatever they are. Um, I thought about writing a novel in which one of them just disappears and two other of YouTubers become kind of interested in figuring out what happened to them. But once I was here, I just began thinking like, why can't I just film it here? Why can't I just do that? And it seemed like it was more and more realistic as I began talking to people. And it's budget wise. I mean, I was going to use some of my retirement money to savings. Uh, Mostly because it's like I just thought this is the one thing I haven't done that I really want to do. I wanted to direct a movie, to have a movie into because I've sold a lot of screenplays that haven't gotten made, and it's always frustrating. Um, uh, so yeah, I just kind of put it together. I hired a local production company. Um, I did most of the casting was local, but I brought in some professional actors as well, and hired some professional local actors, and yeah, made the movie, which I'm editing right now. But the day before we went into production, I stepped out of the shower and I thought, what the fuck have I done? Like, what have I set in motion? Like it's just like I had a panic attack.
I'll bet.
Like
Yeah, I would too. Yeah, I'm sure.
because
That's awesome.
it's a lot of people I hired, and it wasn't cheap, and it was I really don't know what I'm doing. So but it was wild. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was a 3 week shoot, and it just about killed me and everybody on the cast, everybody on the crew. But the crew is fantastic. It looks great when I'm looking at the footage and piecing it together. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see to get the finished product ready
Yeah,
to start
that's
setting.
awesome, man. Is it a short or is it
No, it's a feature. It's a
it's a
crime
feature? Okay.
movie. Yeah, it's a crime thriller. It's going to be hopefully about 90 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's shot all over Phnom Penh. I mean, the great thing is one of my best friends here, she co-owns a bar, and she knows everybody. She's about 27, 28 years old, but she just knows everybody in this town. And so I hired her both to have a small part in the movie, and we used her bar. And her bar is called the Black Sheep. So um uh but she was somebody who, I would say I need a party boat. We're going to film two scenes on a party boat on the Mekong. And she's like, I know somebody who owns a party boat. And so within a day, I'm meeting with the guy who has the party boat and working out the details and how much it would cost. But just quickly, just in terms of the budget, that's the difference between shooting something in the US and shooting something here. I rented a party boat for 2 complete days for filming, and it was $400 for those 2 days. It's like I can't even imagine like what something like that would cost by the end of the day. 2 days in the US. So
Yeah.
it was realistic, and so that's to be able to do it. And so that's why I thought, I'm just gonna do it. I'm 60. And it seemed like a good time to kind of take that big jump.
Well, that's awesome, man. I I I certainly applaud not only your ambition but your bravery as well for that. That's
For
that's
foolishness.
awesome. Well, maybe that too, but there's going to be some of that thrown in, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. All right, all right, man, awesome. Let's go over to JD Clapp. JD Clapp, you have a story in here called Orchard Thieves. Originally, it had a different title. We worked on changing that, but the it's called Orchard Thieves, and so JD came last week to Encinitas and read down at Artifact Books with Jim and I, and it's interesting because in this story, Orchard Thieves, there's actually which I was fuzzy on the details before, but I got to hear some of them last week. Uh, so this is actually kind of from historical accounts, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I was talking to one of my neighbors who kind of grew up in the East County of San Diego, and we were talking about the fire season, and he's like, "Oh, years ago when we had the Laguna Mountains, it's our local mountains burned, they started seeing getting reports of Bigfoot-like creatures in Alpine, which is like 3 or 4 miles away from me. So, foothills of San Diego." Which I thought was, I was kind of like, ah, yeah, bullshit. But he's like, no, no, I got the press clippings. So he started sending me old press clippings and then something from a Bigfoot research site that had the kind of account. And then apparently I started looking into it a little bit. I thought, oh, this would be a fun story to write. And the apparently it happened again in 1990 after the fires here. So I'm like, all right, well, it's interesting, and I got enough little snippets of details, like the first family that experienced this had bought this property from an old rancher who kind of alluded to, there's some creatures that hang around here, and they didn't believe it. And then there was a sheriff that's in the story who had also reportedly seen one of these when he was helping people evacuate um, yeah, with the fires. So I just kind of took the little snippets of what I could glean from these old press clippings and this Bigfoot research report, and I just spun it into a story. So kind of made up the family and the rest of it.
Yeah. And this kind of goes through a pretty there's a lot of time frames in this, right? So it's set it originally what in the 70s, correct?
Yes, yeah, 1970. Yeah. And yeah, it just kind of I set it up where it kind of starts in the fall of 1970 around Halloween, and then it runs out to about a little bit after Thanksgiving. And there's kind of timestamps here, and you kind of get to see little things that happen along the way to the family, and then there's a little bit of a I'd say this is kind of a when you talk about hybrids, it's a little bit of a mystery with horror mixed in. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely got I think yeah, I kind of look at it as a hybrid to be honest, because I definitely see the horror aspect there. So theoretically at least you could write you could write a sequel to this in 1990.
Yep, yep. And actually, as I wrote this, and then when you all took it, I was like, oh, you know what? This might be a good prologue for a novel. So I've actually been working on it. So I'm halfway through the first section, it goes through 1990, and then we'll skip ahead again. So be 3 time periods. And it helps that I grew up in San Diego, so I was around in the 70s and I was around in the 90s, so I can pull some of those historical kind of things that if you're from Southern California, you'll recognize some of that in the stories too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I think after hearing last week, you have a book coming out fairly soon, right?
I do. Yeah, my debut novel's coming out on August 24th. Cowboy Jamboree Press is publishing it. It's called Grit Before Grace. So excited about that. I finished that a couple years ago, and it's taken a while to come out, as the way it goes. But yeah, It's most of what I've written before. I've written some crime fiction, some dark humor, a lot of kind of gritlit stuff. So this kind of falls in that gritlit category.
Very cool. Well, congratulations, man.
Thanks, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, let's go to Mark Coggins. Mark, you've got the first story in this collection. It's called Liverjack, and it's a fun one. What I try to do when I put the track listing together, right? I almost think of it in some ways as like at putting together an album, right? And so with the first song or the first kind of introduction to what's coming in, I always like to put something in that I feel like it can't be too short, it can't be too long, and it needs to start with a little bit of momentum and kind of get the issue going, and then we move from there. So that was kind of the thinking on my end, and in Liverjack you've got a PI who's up kind of in Silicon Valley area, and and we meet him early on, and then it kind of just goes from there. So why don't you talk a little bit about Liverjack?
Yes, but if you'll indulge me, speaking of PIs, I want to introduce my little friend here. That is Raymond Chandler's last typewriter that I happened to
Woo!
win in auction. So
That's awesome.
sometimes I try to start my stories on the typewriter for good luck. I didn't happen to do that here. It doesn't work that well, so it's a little bit challenging.
That
But
is
anyway,
awesome.
I feel it inspires me. So
That is so cool.
Yeah, so my last novel was set in Tokyo and was kind of a medical thriller. And in doing the research, I found that a Yakuza chief had bribed UCLA Hospital to jump the line for a liver transplant. And it turned out during that year in LA, about 200 people died without getting, a donor liver. So it definitely had an impact on people in the community. And then I also knew from just being in the Silicon Valley and reading about Steve Jobs that there was kind of a controversy about the liver transplant he got. He registered in multiple states, and that's something you can only do if you can fly on, a moment's notice to the hospital to receive a liver. And a lot of people felt that wasn't really fair. So I thought, what if one of these tech bro types like, Elon Musk or Peter Thiel type needed a liver and decided to try to pull strings or do something illegal to make it happen. Um, so that was one seed. And then I happened to see a program where they described the whole protocol of how they transport donor livers. Obviously it has to be transported very quickly. It has to be packed a certain way. And typically what they'll do is they'll take it from whatever location it's coming from and fly it on a private plane to, say, a small airport near the hospital where the patient is waiting. And it has to happen, it's very tightly choreographed. It has to happen very quickly. So I thought, what would happen if somebody met that plane at the small airport and stole the liver? So that's why it's called Liverjack. And what happens, of course, in the story is that my private eye, who's a series character named August Reardon, gets hired by the husband of a woman who was waiting for a liver at the Stanford Hospital. And that, of course, you have to match very carefully the donor and the recipient in terms of blood type and all kinds of detailed, kind of matching that they do. So not any liver will do. And she finally gets one. And then when it arrives at the Palo Alto airport, somebody steals it. So she unfortunately dies because of that. And then the husband, who's a firefighter, ex-Marine firefighter, hires Reardon to try to find what happened to the liver. And as I said, since there's all this screening that goes on, and you can't just steal any liver and expect to use it, so Reardon pretty quickly decides that there must have been some inside information that was exploited to know that this liver would match to the person that wanted to steal it. So that's kind of the setup. And he has to go to the airport and does a lot of investigation to find how maybe the liver got transported from the airport. I have a friend who's a pilot, and he helped me with all the details about the FAA and filing flight plans and things like that. So that's kind of the hook and the setup for the story.
Very cool. Yeah. No, absolutely. It does not surprise me at all to hear that the liver donation is not fully on the up and up. Uh, Unfortunately. But hey, real quick, your t-shirt, is that just a random shirt that says Spade on it, or are we doing some Sam Spade stuff there?
Oh, well, yeah. So, as you probably know, the Maltese Falcon, the copyright for that expired. And so I'd always wanted to write um, the Sam Spade story or a Continental Op story.
Uh-huh.
So once it expired, everyone's free to make use of the character. So I've written a couple Sam Spade stories, which were published. And then what I did was uh, I worked with a small press called Poltroon Press, and we did a new edition of the Maltese Falcon which was illustrated with scenes from San Francisco. I'm a photographer as well, so a lot of, as you may know, a lot of what the places in the Maltese Falcon are real places in San Francisco, and it actually happens in a specific week in 1928, and they know that because there's a play that Spade is waiting for Joel Cairo to go see, and that play took place in December of 1928. So anyway, there's a whole, I went around town and took photos of all the buildings that are still extant and paired those with different chapters. And then I added the Sam Spade stories as kind of a coda to the end of the book. And this press, Poltroon, published it last year. And it came out pretty well, I think. I think the photos are probably the main attraction. There have been other illustrated editions of the Maltese Falcon, but the other thing I should say is it's pretty well known where Sam Spade's apartment was because Hammett lived in that same apartment when he wrote the book, and they know that Hammett lived there. And there's a guy who rents that apartment and kind of keeps it it's almost like a museum. He's restored it to the point where it looked like in the 1920s. And so he was very kind and let us come in and take photos of that. So in addition just to the places around San Francisco, like Sam Spade's office is known to be a particular office building, we got into that apartment and were able to take photos of the inside, which I think that really adds to it as well. I had, when they had dedicated that apartment as a literary landmark a while ago, and at that time, Hammett's daughter was still alive, and she was there. I got to go up and to the apartment and tour it, and I got to meet her there. There's a little article on my website that talks about the apartment and gives kind of a layout of it and that sort of thing if people are interested. Yeah.
Okay, so Mark's got Raymond Chandler's typewriter, and he's writing Sam Spade stories, and gets to go in Dashiell Hammett's apartment. Mark lives a different life than the rest of us, guys. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. That's very cool.
Thank
Uh,
you.
let's uh let's change gears a little bit here and go over to Alex. Let's go over to Alex Giannini, and he has because we were just talking PI story, detective fiction, crime fiction, etc. Alex, this one in here called "But She Came," in the review is pretty much just a straight up horror story, and it is. I really liked this one from the very first time I read it. And I think all of us at some point or another have either seen a movie or read a book that starts with a creepy old lady in an old house in an elevated window. And I kind of feel like that one we just kind of get started with that in this, and it just kind of goes from there. So why don't you talk a little bit about But She Came?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what I wanted to do is tell kind of a straight ahead, this house is haunted kind of story. It's the old, like you said, there's a creepy house in the neighborhood. All the kids say it's haunted, but growing up, none of those houses were ever haunted, and that always bugged me. So this one is, and that's kind of the way I frame the story. And I spend an inordinate amount of time walking dogs in my life. I have a lot of dogs, and we walk a lot. This story just happened. I was also reading a lot of Edward Wagner at the time, and there were little piles of things in the woods with my border collie, and it got me thinking about maybe something is going on here. So that's kind of where this where But She Came originated from. And I thought the reason I thought it would be potentially a good fit. And I'm so happy to be in this anthology, but there's a lovely bit of pie eating at the end of the story that I think makes it pulpy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, this one was just fun. It was like I was reading through it, and I for a while I was expecting like a twist or something different, and then I realized no, this is just a straight up creepy story about
Yeah,
this.
like I said, I wanted to be straight ahead. It's, everyone kind of thinks this thing is she's a witch, Eva's a witch, and she's a witch, and a bunch of kids start to go missing, and the town has to deal with that. It's funny though, because a lot of the things that I write, and I mostly write short fiction. There are like my favorite movie is Halloween, the 1978, right? And I love the movie because there's no blood, there's no gore in it, but it's always creeped me out. And it's that creeping sensation, right? So I always have this like I have maybe a bad tendency in my stories to have that twist, that turn all the time. And this one I just wanted, just like walking down the street to that house, I wanted it to just be straight ahead to the house and deal with the consequences.
Absolutely. And I like the early Halloween decor back there, by the way.
There's a lot more of it. My house, you got that awesome typewriter. I just got pumpkins and crap. But
That's awesome. All right, good, Alex. Thank you.
thank you.
Um, let's go over to Dennis. Dennis Tafoya, you've got Cold Creek in here, and I want to. This is one that you're gonna fill us in, but I can only assume that you got this from some kind of historical article or something like that. Or is this just straight up made up? But we have kind of POWs, if you will, that are Nazis here in the States. In this takes place during World War II. And so Dennis, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I'm working on a novel set in the 40s, in the post-war period. So I'm spending a lot of time. I'm basically addicted to newspapers.com, where I spent a lot of time looking at, historical stuff. And there was a call out for short stories set in New York. And I waited too long. I, couldn't contribute to that anthology, but that idea stuck with me. And it brings together a couple of things I've kind of always been fascinated by. The fact that there were, you know, tens of thousands of Nazi or German POWs here, that they worked on farms, just like in the story, for, a relative pittance. And, and also just the life that folks would be leading. The little snippet at the beginning is kind of out of an ad that I saw in the Rochester Democrat Chronicle, about somebody selling a farm because the owner of the farm was in the service. And there's a lot of that. You see a lot of that kind of thing. And then my own natural old lefty politics coming into play about how the rich, manipulated those situations to their own benefit. So the idea that one family would have, would be on the draft board and decide who goes, and also on the ration board, and that sometimes those people also were actually, hoarding, ration materials and all of that. So it kind of pulls together the kind of small town corruption that I think is always interesting. I love short stories. I kind of started with short stories, and but I'm always I'm always trying to keep myself from writing a novel. Because the little details and things that I like really eat up a lot of a lot of type, and I just hope it moves fast enough that it stays interesting. So
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
And you know what? I'm certainly not I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I write a lot of stuff, in the 50s, or early 50s. So I've got three books right now, two novels and a short story collection out, about one character from 1951 to 53. So I'm always doing research as well. But I can't believe I've never heard that ever,
never heard.
that we had all these Nazi POWs over here. I had never
Yeah,
heard.
the one thing they cite, that article was an article from local papers in New York about a German escapee. He escaped, and the FBI caught him pretty quickly. But yeah, there was a whole kind of strange subculture. I mean, famously, in the South, where there was a fair number of German POW camps, German POWs had more privileges in small southern towns than the black folks who lived there did. And so, yeah, that's something that always stuck in my mind from like oral histories, Studs Terkel about the war and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, that's worth a story too, right there. Wow. Yeah. Can't say it's surprising, but boy. Um, what Dennis, what do you got going on in terms of your other work these days?
Well, I've got, like I said, I'm working on another novel now. It's set in 1947, mostly in Southern California and Nevada. It's also kind of based on a couple of real historical characters. A veteran who came back from, much like the character in the book, who comes back from the Philippines after the war, and he's pretty much completely unhinged. He's kind of a genius, who designs electrical, machinery, and that, he's a real character. You can look him up. I can give people info if they're interested in it. And then another guy who was a screenwriter, but also a career criminal, who was, operating around Los Angeles at that time too. So, I really love to play with that. I'm a research junkie, and I'm enjoying writing it. I'll see if I can find somebody who wants to publish it when it's done.
Yeah, that is the catch, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is.
All right. You coming to the 29 Palms Book Fest this year?
I am not. I'll be in Southern California, and I'd love to hook up with you guys, but I'm unfortunately not going to be there for 29 Palms.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Let's go over to Brittany. Brittany, this is your second time in the review. You were just in number 6, I think, right?
Yep.
And in number 6, you had pretty much a straight up horror story. And in this one felt more to me as I was reading it, and I saw that you had submitted a story, and I thought, oh, okay, Brittany, well, and in my head I'm thinking, well, it's probably horror. And then I read it, and it really reads more of a dystopian sci-fi than anything else, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you're essentially talking about a culture or a society with one gender.
Yeah. Yeah, so I looked back and my first draft was from November 2024. I'd written it for a class, and it really was a first draft. And those can kind of be a mixed bag when you get feedback, because especially if you write genre, and people are not necessarily into that. So, but what I did learn is, if someone is saying, I don't understand what happened, whether I want to hear that or not, that's something to listen to. And I think in between the 2 years, I wrote a lot of other stories, but clarity was something that I just kept learning more about. I've gone to some lectures at the MFA for All program, which is with American Short Fiction, and it's great. And so I think I kind of left it alone for about a year before I came back to it, after I'd already done several takes on it. You were actually the first person I sent it to, but it was after version 16. So I finally felt like I got it somewhere where it was clear and it was, all working together. And this is probably like the third story that's been inspired by the movie Bad Day at Black Rock, which is a Western. I didn't grow up loving Westerns just because I don't love like hero versus bad guy stories, but I found some later on. 3:10 to Yuma, the original one, it feels like almost a Twilight Zone feeling of like and Bad Day at Black Rock had such a sustained tension for so long, and you're curious for so long about what's happening, and so there's this like dread. A stranger coming to a small town where they have a secret, which I just found really inspiring. And like I said, this is probably my third that has, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily know it looking back, but that I think that was like a seed of what I wanted to have, that kind of mood or that kind of setting.
Sure. I mean, I was trying so hard right there not to interrupt you because I love that movie. I love that movie, Bad Day at
It's
Black Rock.
great.
It is, and you called it a Western. I would actually call it a noir Western.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's also
you know,
like I love that Spencer Tracy is kind of a proto Steven Seagal because he's old at the time and he's like throwing guys away just like this who are like twice his size and
oh, and he only has one
uh,
arm. He only has one
yeah,
arm.
yeah,
So yeah,
right.
no, it's impressive. But yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we got in that movie we have Spencer Tracy, we've got Lee Marvin, a young Lee Marvin, who is
Yep.
as menacing as ever. We've got either Robert Ryan or Sterling Hayden because I can never get them right, but it's one of those two.
I think it's
And
Robert Ryan, yeah.
okay, all right, and and i- the entire story also takes place in this one town that's literally like what, a couple of blocks
Yeah.
long. None of them seem to work. Uh, the Nobody stays at the hotel. Nobody's visited in years, and they're all just kind of these mean-tempered bad guys. But then there's one lady, right? Like in the whole town. It's like the Smurfs. There's
Yeah.
there's one lady in the town, and she's in a little bit of it. She drives in the Jeep with them, things like that. But it's just really well done, and it was done in a panoramic. It was shot in panoramic, which was not common in those days, and so it's just a gorgeous film
Oh
to
yeah, it's
watch and to look
beautiful.
at.
Yeah.
But
Um,
anyway, so
yeah.
so your story in particular, so you're using that as kind of the influence, but um you said 16 iterations of this. Yeah,
Yeah.
16 versions. That's
Yeah.
that's a
And
lot.
it is a lot, but I'm fairly new to this. I feel like I'm still learning and so I think this one particular, I was excited to kind of learn how to edit and learn how to edit drastically when something wasn't working to be able to say it's not precious. I need to go back and like figure something else out. Fortunately, I have from that class, I had a few women who, even if they didn't like genre fiction, were just able to give really good feedback. I have a writer named Erin Finnerty in New York. We get together about once a month, and she gave me feedback on it. So it just, and for something that's so plot based, I write all sorts of stuff. Some of it's literary and some of it's genre. And, it just has to work where it doesn't feel like it's being forced. Like I knew overall what was happening in this world, but there were a lot of different paths to get there. And, I think in the last couple of years, I've been working hard to be a better writer, to be a better editor. And I think this was a story where that was particularly, uh, I kind of like just let it have it and like worked on it for a long time and put it down and came back to it and stuff. So, um,
And
it's a learning process, really.
it's got to feel pretty good then
It
to get
does.
into
It feels
print. Yeah.
great. Yeah, I'm just so privileged to be here with all these talented writers. And, I love Starlight Pulp because there's just not enough places that do fun short fiction. You know, a lot of it's very serious, or even ones that are genre very limited in what they accept. So I'm very happy.
Yeah, well, we definitely embrace the weird. There's
Yes.
no doubt. If you really don't want to get published with Starlite, you'll send us literary fiction, because that the last thing I want to do is read more literary fiction. Um, because genre fiction is just it's just so much fun. And one of the things that this story struck a nerve with me as I was reading it is that it reminded me of, like, I could totally see this being a Twilight Zone episode.
That's great. I mean, I love the Twilight Zones, and any movie or any story that feels like a Twilight Zone. I'm just, even if it's not very good, I will be there. Um, so that's a huge compliment. Yeah, I mean, I just, I can always, like I said, I don't like it's easy to tell a story. It's set in like kind of a Western town, but I'm just more interested in telling it from the point of view of an outsider who doesn't fit in, who isn't heroic, who isn't, saving the day necessarily, or at least not intending to from the beginning.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you, Brittany.
Thank you.
Let's go over to Nate. Nate, now you wrote No Timeouts, and so this was an interesting one for me, because I'm going to tell you the evolution of this. There was when it comes to crime fiction, what I do, we get more crime fiction than we get anything else, right? We get probably, I'm gonna say 60%, say 60%, right? Crime fiction. Then we get 40% other stuff, westerns and hybrids and sci-fi and horror and whatnot. Um, and so what I do with a lot of the crime fiction, especially early on in the window, is I'll take a look at literally, oh boy, I don't know, 3 pages or so, and see where they are, and see if I think, okay, well, this might be a good fit. Let's see. And then what I do is I package those up and I ship them off to Nate. I mean Jake, and I say, Jake, look at this, and look at these. Give me some feedback. Tell me what you think about them. And your story, No Timeouts, was in that first batch I sent to Jake, and Jake just loved this. He just
Yeah.
loved your story. And keep in mind, I hadn't even read it yet. I had only, read the first few pages. And so he got me that feedback, and I said, okay, obviously I'll definitely check it out. And then that ended up being accepted. But yeah, Jake really, really championed this thing early on. Jake, you want to piggyback on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, I thought it was just a great story overall. I think for me, I come from a big kind of New York sports family, and I think, that culture is very specific, and I think the way that you kind of use that to thread in this kind of, sort of tease out these details about that, you kind of realize, oh, this is a revenge story that goes, we're talking about the IRA now, and we're starting to tease out a little bit more of why this person's in New York at this sports bar watching this game, and how I think it's really rare, I think, to kind of find a story that has that sense of place and time, and then also maintains tension. It's so rare. I obviously, as Brian's saying, I read a lot of the crime fiction stuff that kind of gets sent in, and a lot of it's really great, but it'll be a story that I'm like, let's kind of get to the moment of what's keeping me, going page to page. And I think you kind of used again, there's no timeouts left in the game. You're kind of using that sense of, tension in the game and with everything else that's going on in these characters' lives to just, I was glued to the page. I thought it was really great. And I was really glad to see that ultimately it ended up in the review. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It was a lot of fun to write, and just so you know that, obviously it's a dual timeline. It takes place in the Belfast in the 1970s during what was known as the Troubles. It's the Protestant Catholic sectarian violence that really kind of dominated that era. And then 20 years later in the Bronx, and Woodlawn is a very real neighborhood in the Bronx, as you probably know or you may know. Very Irish, probably the highest concentration per capita of Irish immigrants anywhere in New York, certainly, maybe even the United States. And I'm very familiar with it because I went to Fordham University right down about 10 minutes away, back in the 90s, early mid 90s. And I used to work in this bar that Finnegan's is based upon. It's called Mulligan's. So I really got to know the neighborhood, the area, and not only Irish immigrants, but there were a lot of former IRA who would go there just to get away, and maybe even a safe haven for them. And at the time, they were, a lot of these guys were still relatively young, late 30s to late 40s. Had a lot of stories, especially after they started putting down the JMOs and the Guinnesses, which they did pretty much every night. And that area of the Bronx, Woodlawn, was also there was an organization that was based out of Woodlawn called NORAID. Ostensibly, it was to raise funds for wrongfully imprisoned paramilitaries in Northern Ireland, but they were the largest supplier of guns and money to the IRA at the time, and there was a lot of people who worked for them. And so there's this very real connection, which I don't think has really been explored in fiction. I don't think I've ever seen any story novel that really explores this connection. Again, a very real connection between Northern Ireland and this neighborhood in the Bronx. So I always thought it would be cool to kind of explore that and have this revenge story of this guy whose older brother was murdered in a honey trap, which was one of the IRA's common terror mechanisms. Happened all the time, and then for him to seek out his brother's killers 20 years later. So it was a lot of fun to write, and it gave me a chance to go back to that neighborhood, which I hadn't been back to several times. And also, my mother's side is Northern Irish, so I'm familiar with Belfast and Armagh, and it was a lot of fun to write, and I'm glad that you guys loved it. I'm flattered. Thanks.
Yeah, and absolutely, and it's yours. You had a little kind of postscript there too, in a way, because after this was accepted, I sent out an email saying, okay, guys, if you have finalized versions of these, that, you made some tweaks or whatever, let me know and send them along. And you essentially wrote me back saying, yeah, I actually changed the ending. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But what was the thinking there?
Oh wow, I'm trying to remember. Did I change the ending? I think I wanted to. There were some loose ends.
Mhm.
This bar called Finnegan's. It was actually in the story anyway. It was operated by this former brigade commander in the IRA, and he ends up surviving after having been responsible for all these murders in Northern Ireland. He's the one guy that ends up surviving while certain of his, minions, as well as a lot of civilians in the bar, get killed. And it was just to kind of bolster this, what I was trying to do by weaving in the football game, the rivalry between the Giants and Eagles into the Troubles, was really to use it as a metaphor, because it was and I wasn't alive during the time, but I know a lot about it through family. And again, when I was working in Woodlawn, so random, really, so many civilian deaths. So sloppy. Most of the paramilitaries were very young, didn't know what they were doing. And I thought it was just using the football as kind of a metaphor for the unpredictable nature. It's a coin toss. It's completely random. You don't know what's going to happen, who's going to win, who's going to lose. And I think I tried to just strengthen that theme when I revised it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like Jake mentioned, I mean, the juxtaposition of what we have going on in the bar and the different factions there, combined with the football game playing, is it works really well. In the last review, in number 7, I had a story that I had been sitting on for a while um, that had to do with this guy who's grown up in California, but the whole backdrop of it is this Celtic Rangers game that's going on that he had a lot of experience with because he had been to Glasgow, and so you've got and those kind of tensions they tend to work pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, and it's and as the rivalry heats up and the game is on the line, the tension is kind of heating up in the bar. So I tried to run those two things parallel. I wasn't really sure at the time if it worked. It just sounded kind of fun to me, and I'm glad that it resonated with you guys because that's what I was trying to do. Is the tension and the uncertainty builds, so does the situation with Bobby Keane and the bartender. And also the ending I tried to make purposely vague. Was that was the ending what he had planned all along? Was it a backup plan? Did he make it up on the fly? And again, this is really a metaphor for the Troubles, which a lot of things happen were unintended. They were improvised. There was double, triple agents, the shifting alliances, and at the end of the day, was what happened supposed to happen? Was it what he went there for? Did he intend to commit suicide? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I just wanted to kind of leave it all up in the air for the reader to, constructively put together and decide what they thought. So,
Sure. Yeah, excellent. Good, man. Well, thank you.
thank you.
Let's go over to Jim. Mr. Jim Ruland. Jim, you've got a book coming out, but in the fall, by the way. And what's it called again?
Mightier Than the Sword.
Right, Mightier Than the Sword, fiction novel coming out. Now Jim's an author who's been around a long time. He's got a few fiction books out now. But he's also written nonfiction for a long time and been a reporter in the punk rock scene and stuff like that for decades, really. Uh, and in this particular review, he's got a story called Happy Days, which is just literally the entirety of it. Um, it could be a play. It's just two guys sitting in a I don't want to call it a diner. I think that's giving it too much credit. It's just a kind of a crappy fish restaurant and sports bar. It's a sports bar, right? And you got two guys going back and forth, and there's kind of this undercurrent throughout the entire thing that kind of really comes out in the last few pages. But really kind of grabbed me. So Jim, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird to talk about it because it was inspired by a visit to a similar bar in that my dad likes to go to in West Virginia, where he lives and has lived for, I don't know, 30 something years, even though he's from the Bronx. I don't know how he ended up here, how a Navy guy from the Bronx ends up in West Virginia, but here he is, and here I am. And we went and just had this very bizarre experience that kind of inspired the story. And it's really strange to be talking about it now because we went again yesterday to the same place. And my dad's getting up there, and he kind of part of the impetus of the story is that he's really talking up this fish, and it becomes this almost like a running gag throughout the story. And we sit down at the bar yesterday, and he's like, "It's Friday, and you know what that means? They got this great." I'm like, "Yeah, we had it last time. I'm gonna have a salad this time, Dad." Just because I couldn't sit through another 2 hours of how great the fish was. And but so that became like the whole setup for the story, and one of the reasons why I wanted to send it to Starlite, because I just wanted to make sure the story never made it on the internet. So so there was no chance of him ever stumbling across it. And And so I feel like a little kid up in the attic hiding from my dad right now, so he doesn't hear me talking about him and this strange experience that we had. But it was one of those stories that like it came out really fast. I wasn't planning on writing it, and there's this whole crime element that I'm not going to even talk about, that Brian alluded to, and I just didn't really think much about it, and so I sent it off to some of my readers to get some feedback and help me give some shape to it or some direction. And there were no notes. Everybody liked it. Everybody said like this is like one of my favorite stories, and it's like you work so hard on some and they don't ever quite get to what you imagine for them, and others just kind of come out. And so I'm really starting to love and appreciate the story more now, especially I had a chance to read it last weekend with JD and Brian in Encinitas, and I read parts of it in another reading the week before that. So I'm really quite fond of it now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure I can't speak for everybody, obviously, but I'm sure many of us here have had that experience where you're not even planning on writing a story, something pops up, you get an idea, bam, you get a second idea on top of that, and before you know it, you've knocked the story out. You weren't even planning on it. And then you have other stories where, oh my God, you've been working on this thing like, Brittany with 16 versions of that one story, which by the way, happy ending, here it is, and it's outstanding. But the point is that some of them come so easily and some of them are just pulling teeth.
Yep.
Just pulling teeth the entire time. And like you said, sometimes they never quite develop the way you think they will. Um, but yeah, that's
I
that's
mean,
that's
the story is so fresh. I'm not even really sure I could tell you what it's about, because it's all been a whirlwind, which is in literary fiction publishing any kind of fiction is, well, at least in my experience of publishing, is not how it works. It usually takes years and years and years to come up with the idea and write it and get feedback and feel good about it and send it out and send it out and send it out. And then maybe when it finally gets home, it's, there's quite a bit of distance. And this is
well,
all,
and
yeah.
and like you said, it's weird to get no notes too, right? Because when you send stuff off to people, you you want feedback. Now, you hopefully it's going to be constructive, but and not this sucks. But you want feedback. But when you get no notes, it's weird because then you're like, wait a minute, like, am I am I so off base that or really there people really just grab onto this like that easily?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've tweaked it a little bit since, when you read it out loud, you find things, right? But but yeah, I send it to these guys because there are people who give me good notes and don't, bullshit me. And so it's been kind of one of those magical stories that is kind of a unicorn. If it was always this easy, I'd be doing it all the time.
And then, so you got Mightier Than the Sword coming out in fall.
Yep.
Why don't you tell everybody just very briefly, quick synopsis of what we're looking at in that?
Oh, that's easy. It's four English teachers rob a bookstore.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong, right?
All right, good. Thanks, Jim. Next up,
Thank you.
we got Nevada. Nevada McPherson. This is you've been in the review before as well, Nevada. And this one apparently, according to what I believe you said somewhere, this was inspired by something I told you, which I think is funny because when I was reading it, um, we publish westerns, and I like westerns. I write westerns as well. So I saw that early on that it's a western, and I'm
Mhm.
reading it, and I'm reading it, and all of a sudden it's a fairly lengthy story.
Yeah.
So I want to say I was good 15 pages in, and I was like, oh my God, Nevada sent me a freaking romance. This is a Western romance. I'm like, what? Seriously? Like, and then don't get me wrong, there's some other stuff going on. There's a train robbery and there's some other things. But I'm like, she sent me a Western romance. And but at the end of the day, in its entirety, I just really enjoyed the thing. I just really liked it.
I'm so
So
glad. I'm so glad. It was that conversation at the book festival at 29 Palms last year with you, and I believe Bruce Craven was there.
Hmm.
And you all were talking about, oh, you ought to do it. Yeah, because I had some romance in the story I had read, and you said something about a Western romance, but then, Western, and you kind of, and it's like, I thought, wow, which is great because I love Western movies and I love all the old Western TV shows and everything. And I'm a big Hopalong Cassidy fan. But I had just really hadn't thought of writing a Western. And then I got started writing this one. I just jumped on. I didn't know really what would happen. It's like y'all were just talking about how you start a story and you get an idea for it just to get you started, and then other things happen and other things come along and you get layers and layers. That's what happened with this one. And before long, I was really, really into this story and these characters, and I really enjoyed it. And it was partially inspired too. I mean, just when I was trying to get into it, I posted on Instagram one time a house that I go by all the time. I live about a half hour from Valdosta, Georgia, and that house, it's called the Crescent, and it looks kind of like antebellum mansion, but it's right there in town. It's just a few blocks down from Valdosta State University. But I thought, well, maybe there's something I could do with that. Maybe if it starts in the South and it goes west. I thought maybe that's a starting point for it, just kind of a direction. And so that's kind of Abby, the character. I was imagining who would live here, what could be going on, what story could be happening at this house. And then there is the thing too, Doc Holliday being from Valdosta, or I think they moved here from Noonan. I did some research. And there's all different kind of stories and legends, of course, around him. But sometimes when you mention Valdosta down here, people say, "Oh, Doc Holliday was from there." But I don't know. It was like a runaway train once I got started. So thank y'all for taking it. I really was thrilled.
Oh, of course. So I mean, where did you was the Doc Holliday angle that you bring up,
Mhm.
who she knew
Mhm.
before, right? Is that did that come just because she's coming from Valdosta, or was there
I
something else
don't
involved in
kn
that?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I just had always heard that growing up, and then I started looking up some stuff on it. But I don't know. I mean, he's kind of like in a way, he haunts the story. He's not like
Mhm.
actually, she's having memories of him too, but it's not that he's just he is there, but he's not really. And then Rick, the guy she meets along the way, heading west, is the real. And I don't know, Rick, I don't know, what would you say? Changed for, kind of changed over time. And now that I'm finished with this story, I really do picture it. I'd like to do some other Rick and Abby stories and maybe have some things about, Rick before he headed all the way out west, Abby maybe before, and then once she gets out west, some of the things that she experiences and some of the people she meets. I've already got in my mind some scenes of when she gets to San Francisco and some of the things that happen and some of the people she meets, and doing like a fictionalized version, maybe of some real people from that area. I have in my mind kind of like a Frank Norris type character and stuff like that. So I'm having a good time just thinking of the possibilities for these two characters because I really, I don't know, I loved them once I got to know them. Not since my Eucalyptus Lane characters have I felt this close to some characters. And so I appreciate, you bringing that the book fest, giving me that, planting that in my mind. That was just wonderful. And I kept thinking, he's right. And I need to try some other things and try some genres, and things that I love these genres, but I just haven't tried to write in those genres before. And so that really, I'm grateful for that. So
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's very cool. That I love personally when you write a character and there's not a whole lot of expectations for the character besides just you
get
know
the story told. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
exactly, just getting the story told, and then all of a sudden you find yourself really kind of almost having a
Yeah.
relationship with that character. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yes.
That's a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so two things. First off, I want you to think about this. Since you're talking about westerns and western romance and western films, I want you to think about, don't answer now. I'll ask you later on.
Okay.
Just put it up here. I want you to think about who you would have play those two characters.
Okay.
Okay? From any era, but it's got to be the same era. Like it can't be Maureen O'Hara and Sam Elliott because they're,
Okay.
50s and
Got
90s, right? Okay, secondly, I believe I just saw just the other day, I think you posted something about your screenplay
Yes.
winning an award or something.
Yes, it's the one. It starts with Poser, the Eucalyptus Lane trilogy, and it was a quarterfinalist in the San Francisco International Screenwriting and Film Awards. I think for the series. I think I want to call it Eucalyptus Lane because it'll go over, through the different novels and everything. But yeah, it placed. I don't know. I think it may still be in the running. We'll see if it gets any further. But it was a quarterfinalist, and I was thrilled about that because I think they get a pretty, high number of entries, and I was really excited. So,
Excellent.
yeah, it was because the Eucalyptus Lane trilogy, Poser, the first novel was a screenplay long before it was adapted into a novel, and now it's, going back to kind of its screenplay origins. That was part of the thing with my present tense, in my prose and stuff.
I remember that.
So, but I just kind of, yeah. So I'm still working on that. So yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, awesome. Awesome. And I think last, I think we've only got one author left. Yeah. And if I forgot anyone, I certainly apologize, but I don't think I did. Caleb, we're going to go over to you now. You've got a story in this called Santuario, right? I don't know if I'm doing that justice, but
Close enough for me.
okay, okay. And it's kind of a I found myself in the first like say 8 to 10 pages thinking, oh, okay, this is a Western, right? And it is. It's a Western. Takes place in the Old West. It's a Western, but it also, as it develops, you actually get kind of almost an adventure fiction kind of concept in there too, because you're searching for I'm gonna forget the name of it, but the kind of eternal life aspect of this where you're off on a journey to find and of course he's in trouble because he's already been shot. And so it takes kind of an interesting twist about halfway through. So anyway, once you talk to us about that.
Well, Centaurio was interesting in that I wrote this 10 years ago for it was like an elemental anthology I got invited to write for, and each anthology was supposed to have a theme of some kind of element. So this one was fire. So I thought I had the idea of an eternal flame, something with redemption, or not too much on the docket. Like I didn't have a big idea for it, but I always wanted to write a Western. And I actually haven't read a lot of Western fiction, at least back then. So I was kind of going off of the old Western movies I watched, which were mainly the Clint Eastwood spaghetti Westerns. I was always a fan of like The Man with No Name, and a lot of those stories dealt with revenge and what you're doing um, when things are happening to you, and then you have to handle things your own way. But the original title for the story was La Llama Eterna, which is the eternal flame in Spanish, which I didn't know at the time until someone pointed out that it reads in English like the eternal llama. So that's a completely different kind of story, which I might write one day. But yeah, I wrote for that, and the anthology, for whatever reason, they just didn't put it out, and I never had anything to do with it. It's too long for most places. A lot of places don't even take westerns to begin with, at least that I could find. So I kind of just put it on the back burner. And then when I was like Starlight, you guys did your call out. I don't know. I think you guys do it a couple months ahead of time. And I saw the call out, and I was like, you know what? I would like to write another story for Starlight. And then I was thinking, wait, I do have an old Western I always wanted to get published. And I went and reread it, and I liked the story, but the writing was pretty terrible. I mean, 10 years ago, like when you look at your old work, I don't know if anyone else does this, but I just kind of cringed. And I was like, this needs a lot of work. I don't know if I really want to put forth the effort. But at the time, I was rereading Moby Dick. So I had like all this language coming at me and a lot of archaic words and things that I would like to incorporate into my work. So I was like, I'll rework it and see what I could come up with. So the story's the same, just I improved it and polished it a good bit. And one thing that I was surprised about, which was not my intention when I initially wrote the story, was it's actually a post-revenge story because it's alluded to. It's actually I describe it in flashback scenes in the story that the lone man, he's unnamed there or protagonist, he loses his family. He has some gambling debts and some thugs kill his family, and usually that's the story that's told. Well, in this, that story already happened, but I was always interested in the idea of what you do after that. Revenge is sought. So I always think of Mandy Patinkin's Indigo Montoya in The Princess Bride, where after he gets his revenge on Count Rugen, the six-fingered man, he I'm going to paraphrase here, but he says, I've been in the revenge business so long, I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. I was always interested, like in that story, he thinks about becoming the next Dread Pirate Roberts. Well, I always thought, well, what would the protagonist in an old Western do after, his family is killed? He doesn't really have anything to live for. He has a lot of money, but that's about it. And this is kind of what I came up with. And like I said, the Eternal Flame thing actually came from the theme of that anthology. I just needed to shoehorn something with fire. And I thought the idea of uh, old Aztec type of ruins or something. This is actually set in like the Texas plains, so it wouldn't be Aztec, but um, like an old cult ruins that says you could either find redemption or eternal life or something like that. And I kind of leave it to the reader at the end to figure out what happens, what their interpretation is. But it definitely goes along more into an adventure story, which I also didn't really anticipate because, like I said, I didn't read a lot of westerns, and I didn't. I think this is the first ever western I've written. I might have written a couple flash fictions, but that was about it. So going into it's just good guy shoots bad guy and vice versa. But other than that, everything else I was just kind of winging off of those old Clint Eastwood movies.
Very cool. Yeah, and you know what? You are not exaggerating. It is very difficult to find places to submit westerns. Um, for whatever reason, and I couldn't tell you why, but for whatever reason, westerns were probably the most common type of pulp. Um, Crime certainly would be up there too, but with the Zane Greys and the Louis L'Amours and all that, for a very long time, so the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, the westerns were kind of everywhere and sold very well. And then the 60s happened and they died down. And now it's like, in terms of literature, when it comes to Western stuff, if it's not written by Cormac McCarthy or Larry McMurtry,
Mm.
nobody is allowed to write Westerns or something. It's bizarre. So yeah, that was definitely one of the priorities when I started the review was to get have the review be a viable place where people could send westerns off. So um, the fact that we're getting more these days is very cool.
Well, the only other place I submitted this story to was the Missouri Review, who I have a okay relationship with. I have a good rapport with them. I've submitted stuff to the past, and they've given me decent feedback. Nothing for this one. It was crickets. Like they didn't want it, but that was it. They didn't give a reason why. Usually, like at least they would get an intern to tell me, oh, we like the writing, but whatever, we don't take it. But nothing. It's just like they don't care. They don't want westerns for whatever reason.
No, they
They
do
said they
not.
they said they published westerns, but I couldn't find one that they had other than maybe like some random famous author years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. No, I get it. It's yeah, it's interesting too because I mean a lot of the kind of functioning aspects of westerns and western storytelling is has become ways that we tell stories in almost any genre now. Certainly sci-fi and a lot of crime as well. And yet, yeah, the westerns have just kind of fallen off the map. So it's an interesting kind of paradox there. But yeah, enjoyed it. So thanks for sending it along.
Appreciate you having me.
You got a little like Raleigh fingers mustache going on there right now, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to convince my wife that it's cool. It's not working, but it's getting. I mean, it doesn't grow real thick, but it's getting unwieldy. It goes in my mouth, and it's it's becoming a hassle, and it kind of looks dumb.
I didn't say any of that. I just said
The only people that compliment me are really old ladies and like bikers.
that's awesome. All right. All right. So we lost JD and John because JD had another engagement, and John, it's 4 o'clock in the morning or something. So they should be gone. But at this point, if anybody has any questions for anybody else about influences, something from their story, anything you want to throw out there, Jake, certainly if you have any questions as well for any of the authors, now's kind of an open forum. So anybody want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, I had a question. I was just curious, for Brittany, talking about like, you know, Twilight Zone and anything in that kind of world. I'm always kind of fascinated. I'm like a big like Robert Silverberg fan and like a lot of, the sort of that era of, sci-fi short stories. And I always love like that there's still that attention to detail in the world building. And I think the world building that you kind of again started to put together in your story, and I talking about the 16 versions of it and legibility and everything, like how your approach to kind of the world building of tackling making something that's that kind of distinct in short fiction.
Well, I think that the challenge was how to do the world building where it feels natural and like an actual place. And I do use, I mean, I can't afford to travel to a ton of places, so I do use Google Maps all the time. And so I found an actual town in the Grand Canyon that's like nestled, against the rocks, just to look at, to kind of, it helped me just kind of see where everything would be. And it's not exact, but it was just made it easier to picture what this place was. And yeah, like clarity, I think, I forget if it was maybe Elizabeth McCracken, but someone was saying the hardest thing for a writer to do is get a character from one side of the room to the other. And I think that was really helpful. Just to think about grounding everything, like getting the plot across is one thing, but having it happen in a real space where someone can see what's inside my head. And since I started this 2 years ago, it just took a little while to implement all of that into it. So I'm glad it I'm glad it kind of finally came together.
Totally, totally.
I have a kind of a addendum there. The 16 versions is a lot, like I said, and when I say that, that's actually a testament to you continuing to do that, because that's what a lot of people who say they want to be a writer don't really understand, or they think they want to get into writing. And this is good for people to hear too, that who are writers out there, who are maybe young writers, I haven't been writing for a long time, things like that. Um, some stories, like Jim alluded to earlier, some stories just take a lot more work than others, and they just need constant revision, and others don't. And that does. But what's interesting about it is doesn't mean one is more functional, one is not, one is better, one is not. It doesn't have to do with that. It just has to do with the life that the writing and the story takes on, and sometimes it just takes a lot more versions. But I can tell you, I've never done 16 versions of a story. I can tell you that. I've done probably it's probably 8 to 10 a few times. So when I say that, it's not a criticism. That's a testament. That's amazing that you stuck with it. And again, the feedback that you were getting, of course, that helps as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely more than I usually do. But I really liked it and I wanted it to work. So, and like I said, I think I probably had done about 7 and then put it aside, probably wrote, 10 other stories at least in between, and but wanted to go back to it. So
Yeah, for
labor
sure.
of love.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Questions?
You brought up work ethic among writers and doing revisions and whatnot. I am very interested now in how you guys handle the influx of AI usage in submissions because I know for a fact, and I've had arguments with many writers who use like ChatGPT or other bullshit things to according to them, more of a workshop, not actually using it to write the story. Though I feel if you're taking excerpts from the Chat GPT, or it's like, hey, how can I make this sound better? And it gives you a paragraph that you put into your writing. One, you're kind of a fuckface, but that's just my opinion. But two, I feel like that's lazy. It's not your voice anymore. But how do you detect that? Because I've seen a lot of places where you submit to now that say that if you're caught using it, you'll get banned or whatever. And they have certain software they use, which I've looked into, and I put in like the opening chapter of Moby Dick into it, and it says it's like 90% AI written. So I don't think those work very well. So how do you go about? You just gut instinct or whatnot?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I have a life in the AI stuff for me is interesting because I have a life in academia as well, as a teacher, and I'm constantly dealing with it on that level, in essays. And so, I'm not going to say I'm like some magic AI detector. I'm not, but I see a lot of it. So, I actually, am very kind of wary about it. What I will say is this, Caleb, and I've mentioned this on past podcasts. I don't know if it was one of the ones you were in, but uh, we're a part of the CLMP, which is the Community of Literary Magazines and Presses. Okay. Um, and we have this big, gigantic email chain, and we communicate a lot. So when people are caught um, using AI, they essentially kind of sort of get blacklisted. They get blasted on email and said, this is this person, this is what they submitted, this is what we found, watch out, essentially. And it goes to hundreds of literary magazines out there. So, so there is kind of this, almost like this watchdog group, right?
Mm,
And you know what else we get, and that you'd be surprised with. The AI is obviously something that we're gonna be dealing with for a while. Okay, there's no doubt about that. But you know what we get, and I don't mean we in terms of Starlight Pulp. I mean in terms of the literary magazines. What they get a lot of, believe it or not, plagiarized stories. A lot of plagiarized stories.
really?
Yes, a lot. Where they'll be like, okay, we publish, the New Orleans Review or whatever published this story by this person. Unfortunately, we found out that's actually from a 1993 issue in Harper's by this author. Whoops. So obviously they have to take it out of their issue. Then they let us know who the author was that sent it in. So, and to watch out for that. And then a recent ones, and obviously I'm not going to mention names or magazines, anything like that. But a recent one, believe it or not, was somebody who was on their staff that they published. They found out it was plagiarized. And they were like, not only does it break our hearts to do this because this is somebody that's worked with us and we like, but on top of that, watch out for this person, and this is plagiarized, we have to remove it now. And so, and that to me is just so weird. Using AI to me is bullshit, yes, but it's lazy. It's just lazy, right? Like Brittany went through 16 versions of her story because she worked her ass off on it. A person that uses AI will never understand that, ever. They'll never do that. Okay? But that aside, why you would want to even call yourself a writer and then plagiarize somebody else's work, I cannot even fathom that. Honestly, like, is it so important to get to show mom and dad and girlfriend or boyfriend that you publish something that you're literally willing to put your entire artistic reputation on the line for that? I just, it's so strange to me. I don't get it.
50 years ago, you might have been able to get away with that, but I don't understand how anyone can think they would get away with that now.
Yeah. In the internet era. Yeah. Yeah, very strange. But yeah, like I said, in terms of AI checkers, yes, AI checkers are very inconsistent. Okay. It's essentially AI checking for AI. And what that AI platform might recognize as AI might not be AI. And so they're very inconsistent. You might get I've worked with a number of checkers, more on the academic side, but regardless, I've worked with a number of checkers, and sometimes one checker will say 13%, the other will say 33%, and I'll get one that says 80%. Well, that doesn't help me. Okay, because 13% is not a big deal, right? 13% is not a big deal in terms of it being AI, because when you're dealing in academia with things like reference lists and stuff like that, you're going to have some carryover in certain things, similarity percentages, stuff like that. But and if you used that, if you're not a writer, okay, let's say you're not a writer, you're an engineering student who has to write a paper. If you use AI to help you generate ideas or help for organization or something like that, you're going to get a little bit of that percentage bleeding in, but that's not a big deal because you're not writing your dissertation and you're not trying to get this published. You're just trying to write a paper for a class, and AI is available. AI wasn't available for any of us. None of us. When I went to college, I had a freaking word processor. No bullshit. Okay. So it wasn't available for any of us. It's available for them 24/7 anytime they want it. So if you're not a writer or not an artist, I understand the draw to want to do that. Now, I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying I get it. But as an artist, I don't. Just at all. Like if you can't do it, you can't do it. Okay. So work harder and get better at it, or don't do it. But don't cheat. Don't do that. Right? And that's the way.
Writing's fun, right? I mean, isn't that why
It
we're
is.
doing it? It's because we like it. That's the thing that blows my mind the most.
Yeah, and I've heard some comments about people who consider themselves an AI artist, which does not exist, by the way. Writing a good prompt does not make you an artist, regardless. But either way, I've run into some people who consider themselves AI artists, and they'll talk about how, well, they can put out 6 books in 6 months, and it's like, oh, so what? Like, if it's crap to begin with, and you didn't do any of the work, how can you even take credit for it? And people will say things like, "Oh, well, I got the idea." Well, you know what? The entire process of being an artist is taking the idea and making it something your own. That's the whole thing. And so turning it over to AI doesn't make it your own. Ever. It's just your idea. So what? We all have ideas. Everybody has ideas. So the whole thing to me is confusing. But yes, we have blacklists. And we have people that are on the lookout. But you know what? Also, Caleb, the one of the reasons that we charge is, well, one of the reasons is just functional, because it ends up paying for the ISBN and some of the writer fees. So, that makes us essentially solvent as a review, where we can just continue to roll them out, pay the writers, and get the ISBNs done. But the other reason is because, and I kind of struggled with this in the very beginning, but the other reason is because, like I said, in CLMP, we get these emails all the time, right? From various literary magazines. Sometimes they'll have 40 people that have written an email or responded to it, and other times there's none, right? There's just one out there. Point is, though, we continuously get these new messages, and I learned a while back that New Orleans Review, who I mentioned earlier, they mentioned that they get 7,000 submissions a year. 7,000 submissions a year. Now, you want to know who reads submissions for us? Me and Jake. That's it. Okay. So there's no way we could handle anywhere even approaching that amount of submissions. And the reason they get so many is because they're free. And I'm not knocking that at all. That's great for them. But the reason they're free is because they are part of AWP, which is the Associated Writing Programs, which means that they have an army of graduate students who are free labor. Trust me, I know, I was one at USC, who are free labor on their lit mag at any time. If I had 10 Jakes, right? If I had 10 Jakes, well, sure, maybe we can handle that. I don't. I have one Jake. I have one Jake and one Brian. That's it. So part of the reason is, and there are a lot of writers out there who will see that submission fee and automatically it's nope, they're not going to do it. And that's okay. I understand that. I get it, because what that does is it makes the amount of submissions we get manageable for us, also makes the review solvent moving forward. And then, funny enough, you mentioned this. I do not know by any stretch of the imagination every author that submits to us. I don't, okay, at all. But I will say I usually know probably about a third, sometimes even half of the submissions I get. Now, it doesn't mean, obviously we don't publish them all, but the point is that I know a lot of the authors, and when you have a relationship with the authors, there's an understanding, at least from my end, certainly, that you're not using AI. We make it very clear on the website, AI work is not welcome, and in any part of the process. And so that's one of the things that I was actually speaking at the UC Riverside creative writing symposium a couple of months ago. Todd Goldberg was nice enough to ask me to come out there, and I did a lecture. And so I was talking about this, and I said one of the problems with AI now is that when I get a submission from, say, Mark, and I can look at Mark's bio and I can see what Mark has done, or I get a submission from Caleb, who I've published twice and who I know, there's something there that I can look up, check, research, do what I need to do. One of the problems with AI is the writers who have not been published. If they turn in a story that is intriguing, but they've never published anywhere, it kind of makes you go, And that's not fair. Don't get me wrong. It's not fair. I'm just being honest. Like, you look at it and you're like, God, I really need to double and triple check this. Where when I get a submission from Dennis, I don't need to double check it. Dennis is having his books made into TV shows. If he's using AI, I'd be surprised. So, I don't know what to tell you. So it's
I
like,
might get more into print.
So honestly, it's a number of things, as you can tell, but it's like there's the CLMP side of things and the communication we have. There is my own internal detector, and then there is this aspect of who I know, who I trust, what I can check in terms of what's been published, and and then unfortunately, the ones who are suspect become the ones who don't have much of a publication history, which sucks. I mean, that's totally unfair, because one of the things that has been literally since I started publishing people in the review, one of the biggest joys I've had is we've published, I want to say 4 or 5 authors who it was their very first publication. And every single one of you here remembers that. Okay, every single person. You remember that. And so it's such a cool experience to be able to give that to somebody, and then to have it suspect because now all of a sudden everybody that can write a sentence is suspect in using AI. It sucks. But it's just part of the game at this point. So anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns, stories? Oh, Nevada.
Oh, I was just going to say, I enjoyed hearing everybody talk about their stories so much. I'm still working my way through the volume. I've got a break coming up. My summer break's coming up from school, and so I'm going to get lots of my reading finished here. And then I'm going to read your new book. I'm excited about that. But I've enjoyed so much hearing like the inspiration and just kind of the stories about the stories. And so I'm looking forward to finishing up the review and everything during my reading period break. But I just want to tell everybody I really enjoyed it, and
So,
you too.
well, thank you. So who did you come up with for me for actor and actress?
I haven't. Oh my gosh, I need more time.
Oh, jeez. All right,
I
Nevada.
know.
All
I'm
right.
sorry. I just sometimes an actor does leap to mind for a certain character, but
Mhm.
for those, I don't know. I have a somebody for Abby kind of lurking around, but I don't know for sure. I think I need to take a closer look, but I don't know somebody similar
No,
to
no,
like.
no. Don't start guessing. No,
Okay,
you need to come up with it. All
I'm
right.
gonna wait then.
All right. All right. All right, good. Anybody else? All right, guys. So, well then, thanks for coming on today. I appreciate it. I hope that you guys are enjoying the new review and have read through it. Those of you who are just watching or listening today, or you're a friend or family member or something like that, or one of the writers, appreciate you stopping by and taking a look. This is the new review, Starlight Pulp Review number 8, and had a blast putting it together. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Hang out for me for just a second as we stop this. Everybody else, Starlight Pulp Review number 8. It's out now. Excellent authors all the way around. And thanks so much for stopping by.
In this topsy turvy